Eva Vonk, goedemiddag. I'm delighted that we're together here today, and I wanted to start before we go into any of the substance. I really wanted to know Eva Vonk. Who is Eva Vonk, and how did she get to where she is?
Thank you very much. My name is Eva Vonk, and as the goedemiddag has probably already given away for some of the people listening in, I am from the Netherlands, and I've been living in Berlin, Germany for almost 12 years now, and have been part of a film production company there, and eventually started a non-profit multimedia organization in Germany, and am now working on a big game project.
If I can take you back on the journey back to your school days, what was your experience of school?
My experience of school, generally, I have very happy childhood memories. So I've had a really amazing creative upbringing filled with storytelling and filled with imagination. But if I'm quite critical towards my last school time, my last official school time, having been Film Academy, I would say that I have good memories, but also quite negative ones, as it's always felt like being forced to take a certain beaten track. And especially in the world of storytelling and becoming or being taught how to become a good storyteller in the film industry, I felt that my studies were quite linear and quite unimaginative, in the sense of forcing us as students to take a certain direction as then becoming accomplished.
So in a sense that's kind of very prescriptive, isn't it? It's the teaching element and the expectations and the one-line approach that comes with it. My good friend, the late Sir Ken Robinson, would say that gradually we teach creativity out of children as they get older, and I think there's a great deal of truth in this. Do you know when you were growing up, what or who perhaps inspired you?
I would immediately think about my parents when asked this question. And I guess I'm also privileged to be able to give that answer, to really think about both my parents. My mom was an English tutor, but then became a school director. And my father was a creative. He was a copywriter and a media man, and he made radio shows, but he also used to come up with big theater pieces to celebrate any moment of celebration or any milestone moment in the family. So we would make big wedding celebration videos with our entire family in our basement, which would turn into a studio, for example. And I think today I've really become a product of my parents, having been educators and creators, and somehow this has now turned me into me, in a sense.
When we look back at the education system and the systems that we've experienced, what do you think is missing?
When I really think about this question, and also when I look at the process of my own mother, for example, I think what is really missing is agency for educators, because they have really incredible tools at their disposal nowadays, yet they are very much stuck into a curriculum that is outdated, that isn't necessarily suiting for the type of kids or individual children that they have in their classroom, but they haven't got that much encouragement, freedom, or even time to truly see how to best leverage all these tools. So we live in a time where everybody on YouTube is suddenly a coach or a trainer, or has somehow can help you find a way to optimize your life. And there's really great things out there which are potentially tools for teachers to expand their learning. But of course they need to find the incentive, or they need to be incentivized somehow to absorb that, but also still to legislate that or to leverage it into a system that truly serves their kids, but also fits in their day, which is obviously also only 24 hours long. But I think it's really agency and incentive to better leverage technology and tools that can be used.
Eva, before we go into that relationship between media and education, I'm very interested to find out more about Tales of Us. In a concrete sense, what is it? Why is it? And actually, where did it come from?
Yes. Tales is a multimedia initiative dedicated to, as the name might give away, tales, and specifically Tales of Us, meaning all of us. And our organization is dedicated to combating stereotyping or fear-based messaging, and specifically tries to help this notion of othering. So this psychological effect that one can get by seeing stereotypes or by seeing something that they detach themselves from, and as such creating more separation in the way we see the world or perceive the world around us. And Tales is a result of our understanding of how much responsibility media has for this, or could have, to combat this specifically. So Tales first started as a project to help tell stories from the Congo Basin. These stories were collected over the course of 3 years in the rainforest in Congo, in a small town called Mbomo. And in this town, we were able to help unveil beautiful ancestral mythologies that were shared through generations and carried a lot of understanding of this beautiful and very, very important rainforest that the world knew so very little about. And this project was first published as a book and a short film, traveled all around the world as an exhibition, became a soundscape as well, and really was what we now know as a sort of trans or multimedia project. And having been so inspired by helping telling these stories and making sure that these stories from Congo counteract the stories that we hear so very, very often coming from Congo. Because a lot of people, when they hear the word Congo, they might think about civil unrest or they might think about Ebola. They don't necessarily think about the fact that it's an extremely culturally rich country, that it is so biodiverse, and that this Congo Basin is often by biologists and conservationists really seen as the second lung of the world. So having had the privilege to work and learn from this project, because we always say that in the first place we were students of this project, and in the second place we kind of helped telling these stories. This was what eventually gave birth to the idea to start a nonprofit organization which fully dedicated itself to continue helping telling these stories and bringing these stories into some way or form of media or mainstream media, let's say. And during the pandemic, Tales started to focus on digital media. Of course, having, as everyone else, been locked inside four walls, we really started wondering what content is needed today. What does the world need? So if we as a nonprofit dedicate ourselves to stories that should be told and content that must be created, what does the world really need now? And we quickly concluded that it's kids that need good content, and it's kids that need content that helps them see the world beyond their own horizon. And this first set us on a journey to create a web series and eventually a website that we really loved working on. But I think in light of transparency, we also learned a lot from in terms of what not to do, as we created a website with a forum and a lot of beautiful quizzes. But children nowadays, they don't like forums and quizzes. They like Roblox and they like TikTok. So we learned a lot what not to do, and actually were guided on a journey of what to do, and learned a lot about this rise of Web3 and rise of the metaverse, but also where children are spending most of their time, and eventually developed the idea of a multiplayer digital world for kids up from the age of 8, the age where children first start to learn what empathy is, or how to be compassionate, and how to really start thinking about the world outside of themselves. And we created an idea we now call WOO. And WOO stands for World of Us. And in the WOO, we will invite children from all over the world to learn about each other directly from each other. In building WOO, it's been incredibly important to recognize that including children and including cultural representatives of the localities that these kids are going to learn about in the process. So what we often say is that our process is our product. And that concretely means that every step we take towards building the WOO game is really thought through and really thinks about inclusion, representation, and trying to understand the difference between contribution and co-creation. And the second is very important, because we're really taking a lot of responsibility. We took this upon ourselves to say, we're going to create a game about the world, for the world, with the world, which is obviously a very Homeric task. And how are you going to go about that? And how are you also going to go about that in a really responsible way? Because we've learned so much in how you can do that in a poor way or an uninformed way, and who gets to tell stories, and even in a more philosophical sense, who gets to teach? Who is responsible for knowledge being shared, and what gives you the authority to share this knowledge? So with these philosophical questions, we really have been kind of constructing and deconstructing the way we go about telling our stories, or telling the stories of the world, let's say. And in our process, we, for example, spend a lot of time on working on a participatory design methodology, which means that we bring digital creators together with cultural representatives of different localities. And these localities generally are based in places of great ecological importance. And beyond Congo, we decided to, before we go for the rest of the world, to add 3 more localities that are also very important for our climate, let's say. So these 3 localities are based in Romania, in Brazil, and in India. And over there, next week, we're about to start our first participatory art direction design sprint week, which means that we're going to be taking digital creators from the country to specific places where they're going to be meeting cultural representatives that can help us best tell their stories, and also help us decide how this is going to look like. How is this going to be presented to a child? Who gets to decide how that is presented to a child? Because we really know nowadays that it is extremely important. And we really have this sentence at Tales that we often repeat, which is, nothing about us without us can be for us. So in every step of the way, we try to make sure that we create still tangible frameworks that we can adhere to this notion, that we can make sure we include people whose stories we are essentially telling in the world that we'll be creating for the children. And inside this world, children can go on quests. They can enter the world in a space we call Seedland today. So we see them as little seeds that are planted in this new digital world, in a world that doesn't know borders, that doesn't know language, that really brings children together in a completely equal form to go out and explore. And the way they will explore this land is through, like I said, quests. But these quests bring them through traditional mythical tales. And these tales are leveraged by gameplay. So let's say there is a tale that is about the full moon. The child will somehow interact with the full moon. And while they enjoy, because obviously fun should be as our first priority, because we also often say should avoid creating chocolate covered broccoli, because even though it's 3D and it's very colorful and it's really fun, it shouldn't feel like a repackaged boring school lesson, of course. And still kind of like put the medicine in the candy in a way or form. But every lesson learned is based on something authentic. So where it be an authentic plant or a sacred plant or a story about an animal or. There's so many stories to tell, of course. And in this first volume of the land, let's say, we focus on these 4 localities, and we focused on many other participatory models to help us build this world.
Why does it exist? What's the main motivation to get to young people with your stories?
The main reason why Tales exists is because we found, when we embarked on this mission to tell certain stories, we found that especially in these specific subjects, when it comes to climate and when it comes to cultural identity, we're still living in a time that is stereotyping or very fear-based or very doomsday. And we really acknowledge how powerful the media is and how much it dictates how people see the world and how people perceive the world around them. And believing really in, if media can so much separate us or make us afraid somehow, it can also potentially do the opposite. So we started Tales as an organization to try and do just that, to actually bring people closer together, to bring more understanding, to combat stereotypes, and to really make sure that within media we can also make representative stories available for people, or more accessible, and especially for young people.
You know, sometimes I think when we talk about working for children, we speak about them as if they're not in the room. How do you engage young people everywhere in your work?
I think first, it's been very important for us as a team. So Tales is a collective, so we work with a large group of people from all over the world. And the first thing for us to collectively understand and acknowledge was that children that were brought up in the 21st century have a vastly different way of understanding the world around them, or technology, or concentration span for that matter. They're very savvy in finding information or getting out there online. And one of the things that we're doing is we're making sure that we are creative with these moments that we in media would mostly see as test viewings, for example, or test audiences, or somehow beta testing, let's say. And every moment of testing for us becomes a knowledge sharing event, during which we both invite the children to participate in a workshop, something that we could maybe teach them, but at the same time also invite them to give feedback in fun and engaging ways. So entering a prototype of what we're building, for example, or seeing part of a content that we're editing, and somehow through a fun way provide us insights on how they are consuming it, how they're enjoying it, or also how they aren't really enjoying it maybe.
But in 2023, why should, or perhaps must, in your view, media and education work together?
When children are asked why they go to school, it's mostly because they have to. And somehow there's this consensus that school is punishment, and media or social media or anything content related is reward. And as such, a child is more drawn to videos on YouTube than maybe the curriculum that was carefully built for them in schools. And seeing that media is so powerful and has so much responsibility for how children are perceiving the world, or even how their parents are perceiving the world, we need to leverage this better. We need to make sure that this bridge is more carefully maintained somehow, because the bridge is very clearly there. And there's so much opportunity that is there for us to somehow seize. And if we find a better way to meet each other, I think this will definitely create a better, more modern, more inspiring media and educational landscape.
Could you give us an example? Could you give us a project, an outline that says, here's a very clear example of how within Tales of Us bridges that gap?
Yes, and it's definitely something that doesn't come without a challenge, because of course you need a buy-in, right? So you need a buy-in of a teacher that is already overwhelmed and busy enough to want to invite us in their classroom. Now, one of the things we're doing at Tales is called BOW, which is short for Build Our World. And Build Our World is a series of workshops during which we enter the classroom and facilitate digital literacy training. And during these trainings, children will learn how to build a digital object. And whilst they are building this digital object, they are very much talking about how I can tell a story with this object, or what does this object say about me, and how can I share that with a bigger group. But at the same time, this BOW workshop, of course, like I said, it needs the buy-in of the educator. So it needs a curriculum for the educator too. So it's a very interesting dialogue that takes place between someone that is already more actively working with a group of children that is suddenly becoming part of a digital platform and needs to educate and somehow kind of become an admin instead of a teacher in a digital world. So in this process, I think Tales is making sure that we really spend time both with the kids during BOW, but also with the educator, also with someone that might become really part of making sure that what we are building is actually going to be used in the future, and actually is going to be used with joy and celebration.
Yeah, it's a very interesting point, that dynamic between, traditionally speaking, the learner and the teacher. When it comes to technology, that dynamic changes. I mean, I would argue that my nearly 18-year-old daughter is probably a better teacher in terms of the use of technology than some of her teachers are. And I think there is an issue of kind of redefining this. But also, as I listen to you, I'm reminded of one of my favorite quotes, Thomas Paine, who said that the mind once enlightened cannot again become dark. And to achieve that in a partnership is wonderful, I think, and is better than anything we've seen in the past. Final question: what one thing would you like our viewers to take away from the conversation we've had today?
A sense of excitement, because there are many initiatives out there that once we build those bridges, or we dust off those bridges, can really make the future of education really exciting. I feel that the gaming industry, given its nature of gaming, is an industry that offers a lot of freedom. So there's no linear way for us to make the game, which also creates more space to reinvent the wheel. Much more space than I've felt in the past with producing a movie or a documentary, for example, which is very straightforward, often done in blocks. And through this experience, I've been given the opportunity to, together with the team, really question where we should allocate time, manpower, and funds. And one of the takeaways is that it's incredibly important to really spend time in your research stage, to really understand whose stories are we telling and how are we telling and who are the storytellers, because we're not the storytellers in this case. We're responsible for creating culture or for creating media that is about culture. And media really often has tendency to really feed into prejudice and bias confirmation, and also is very guilty of social exclusion. And with the responsibility to work on knowledge sharing, it is about social equity. So make sure that when planning a project like this, to allocate resources for community engagement and research. I think one thought to add is that since we're so dedicated to collaborating, and since we have the great honor to also have the funds thanks to the foundation that is backing our project, we've also decided to share our journey, to share how we're building World of Us and create resources out of all the research that we've been doing and all the trial and error that we've come across, and actually edit this on a platform called worldofus.info, which is currently online and which is mostly dedicated to our understanding that our responsibility is still really finding the questions that we should find answers to, but also inviting whomever wants to join us on this journey of finding these answers, because it is really exciting, and it is exciting to work on shaping a bright digital future. So one really important thing in gaming is winning. And a rule in Woo Game is that you can only win when you collaborate. This is one of the things that we've been very dedicated to incentivize children to collaborate, to get ahead, which is something we truly believe in. And we really hope that you will find us on worldofus.info, because we're waiting for you.
Eva Vonk, thank you for waiting for us. Hartelijk bedankt. This has been an amazing time spent for me. Lessons learned, there are many, but the bit that will stick with me is that you can only win if you collaborate. And I think that is, considering that we were going to talk and have done about the potential partnership between education and media to make things better for future generations and to make futures better, I think we're there. It's very clear that it isn't a recommendation, it's a must. Thank you so much for being with us, and tot ziens.
Tot ziens.